The small village of Chahenkalo sits in the heart of central India, where ancient traditions still weave through modern life like threads in worn fabric. On December 14th, 2024, the village settled into its usual nighttime quiet, the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. Inside a modest home, 35-year-old Priya finished her nightly routine with mechanical precision. She brushed her teeth, pulled on her pajamas, and slipped under the covers. But as she lay there, waiting for her husband Anand to finish his bath, the silence of their home pressed down on her like a physical weight. Their house had always been too quiet. No patter of small feet, no childish laughter echoing through the hallways, no toys scattered across the floor. Just silence, constant, oppressive silence that served as a daily reminder of what they didn't have. For years, Priya and Anand had tried for a child. They'd visited doctors, followed medical advice, made dietary changes, but nothing worked. And now, in their mid-30s, that window of possibility seemed to be closing. The sadness had become a constant companion, sitting beside her every night as she waited for sleep to come. But Priya had learned to cope. She'd trained herself to redirect her thoughts to the good things in her life. Her relationship with Anand was strong. They were partners in the truest sense. They communicated openly, supported each other's dreams, and found joy in simple moments together. Their marriage was everything she could ask for. Everything except the one thing they both wanted most. The bathroom door suddenly burst open, shattering her contemplation. Anand stumbled out, but something was horribly wrong. He wasn't dressed for bed. Instead, he wore only his bathrobe, clutched loosely around his frame. His movements were frantic, uncoordinated. Priya sat up, her heart beginning to race. "Anand, what's wrong?" But as her husband turned toward her, she gasped. His face glowed in unnatural crimson, as if all the blood in his body had rushed to his head. His eyes were wide, panicked, bulging slightly. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out, only a terrible, strangled, wheezing sound. Before she could even throw off the covers, Anand spun and ran. Not walked, ran out of their bedroom, his bare feet slapping against the floor. The bathrobe flew open behind him as he disappeared down the hallway. "Anand!" Priya screamed, leaping from the bed. She ran after him, her mind racing through possibilities. Heart attack? Stroke? Allergic reaction? Nothing made sense. She found him collapsed on the ground outside their home, his body convulsing slightly. In the moonlight, that crimson color on his face looked even more grotesque, almost purple now. His chest heaved, but no air seemed to be getting through. Priya dropped to her knees beside him, rolling him onto his back. "Anand? Anand, can you hear me?" She shook his shoulders, patted his face, anything to get a response. But his eyes, though open, seemed to look through her rather than at her. Terror gave way to action. She bolted to their neighbor's house. Anand's cousin lived just next door. She pounded on the door, not caring about the late hour. "Help, please help. Something's wrong with Anand." Within minutes, a small group had gathered. They lifted Anand's limp body into a car, and someone drove while Priya cradled her husband's head in the back seat. The 20-minute drive to the nearest hospital felt like 20 hours. She kept checking for breath, for a pulse, for any sign that he was still with her. At the hospital, everything became a blur of fluorescent lights and urgent voices. Priya ran inside, shouting for help. Medical staff responded immediately, wheeling out a gurney. They transferred Anand and rushed him inside, with Priya running alongside, one hand gripping the cold metal rail of the gurney. They swept him into an examination room. Priya stood in the corner, pressed against the wall, watching doctors and nurses swarm around her husband. She could see their faces, their expressions shifting from urgency to confusion to grim acceptance. The lead physician stepped back from the table. He pulled off his gloves slowly, his shoulders sagging. When he turned to face Priya, the look in his eyes told her everything before he spoke a word. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly. "Your husband is gone." The words didn't land at first. They couldn't land. This morning, Anand had been laughing at breakfast. This afternoon, they discussed their plans for the weekend. How could he be dead now? How? The word came out as barely a whisper. He was healthy. He's only 35. What happened? The doctor shook his head. "I honestly don't know. There's nothing obvious. We'll need to perform an autopsy to determine the cause of death." 2 days passed in a fog of grief and confusion. Priya moved through the funeral preparations like a ghost, her mind unable to reconcile the reality of her husband's death with the complete absence of any explanation. In a sterile examination room at the hospital, the pathologist prepared to perform Anand's autopsy. Dr. Rajesh Kumar had conducted hundreds of these procedures over his 20-year career. This case puzzled him, but he approached it methodically, as he always did. A healthy 35-year-old man doesn't simply die. There had to be a cause. He began with the most likely culprit, the heart. Sudden cardiac arrest could strike anyone, regardless of apparent health. He made the initial incision, carefully examining the heart tissue, the arteries, the valves. But everything looked normal, perfectly normal, in fact. Moving on to the lungs, perhaps a pulmonary embolism, though the symptoms didn't quite match. Again, nothing. The lungs were clear, healthy, showing no signs of distress or disease. Dr. Kumar worked his way through every major organ system. Liver, kidneys, brain, stomach, each one appeared exactly as it should in a healthy young man. It was as if Anand had simply ... stopped. But people don't just stop. Frowning, the pathologist decided to examine the throat and airways. Sometimes foreign objects or severe allergic reactions could cause rapid death. He made a careful incision along the trachea and began to open the throat. What he found made him step back from the table, his gloved hand going to his mouth. Lodged in Anand's trachea was a small, partially intact chicken, a baby chick. It had blocked his airway completely, suffocating him within minutes. But how? Why would a grown man attempt to swallow a live chicken? The investigation that followed revealed the heartbreaking truth. Anand, like his wife, had been devastated by their inability to have children. But unlike Priya, he hadn't resigned himself to acceptance. He'd sought help, just not from medical doctors. He'd contacted a tantric, a practitioner of what some consider a cult or mystical arts. In rural India, tantrics still hold significant influence, promising solutions where modern medicine fails. This particular tantric had prescribed a ritual, a fertility ritual that supposedly guaranteed success. The instructions were bizarre, but specific. Anand must swallow a live baby chick whole. The symbolism was supposedly powerful new life. Entering his body would grant him the ability to create new life. The tantric had assured him it was safe, that the chick would pass through harmlessly, leaving behind its life essence. On that December evening, while Priya waited in bed, Anand had gathered his courage in the bathroom. He'd hidden the small chick in his bathrobe pocket. And then, believing he was about to solve their greatest problem, believing he was about to give his wife the family she desperately wanted, he'd attempted the unthinkable. The chick, naturally terrified, had struggled. It became lodged in his throat, blocking his airway. Anand had staggered out of the bathroom, his face turning purple from lack of oxygen. He tried to run for help, but collapsed before he could explain what had happened. Both Anand and the chick had died that night, victims of desperate hope and dangerous superstition. When police informed Priya of what her husband had done, she collapsed in grief all over again. The man she loved had died, trying to give her the one thing she wanted most. His love for her, his desire to make her happy, had cost him everything.